I don't think we need the old guard holding us back, Trent said, loud enough for the entire Zoom call to hear, like he was auditioning for a reboot of The Office but forgot there were real people on the line. I was still chewing a grape Mentos and nearly choked. Old guard? Interesting choice of words for the woman who kept this company's billing system duct taped together through 3 mergers, a ransomware scare. And that one time, the CFO accidentally deleted his own login credentials because he thought cookies were actual snacks. Trent had been here exactly 12 business days. He wore his badge like a sheriff and walked around like he just invented spreadsheets. His background? A LinkedIn trail littered with growth stories and job titles like digital transformation prophet or whatever sounded impressive to venture capitalists with too much trust and not enough sleep. When they said I was being repurposed for strategic optimization, I nodded like I gave a damn. What it really meant was, you cost too much and your cubicle doesn't match our new open plan vision board. Translation, out with the old, in with the Wi-Fi-enabled espresso machine. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I just handed over my badge and smiled that smile HR people dread, the one that says, "Oh honey, you think this is the end, but you just started my second act." And hey, before I forget, if you're still listening and haven't hit that subscribe button or dropped a like, you might be one of the 97% who forget. But it means a hell of a lot to our team and helps keep these stories rolling. Thanks, sugar. Now, I wasn't stupid. I knew how this would go. I had 22 years of system knowledge in my brain, my desk drawer, and a password-protected sticky note file labeled definitely not passwords.txt. The systems they were trying to modernize were built like Frankenstein's monster, part cloud, part on-premises, part black magic, and only I knew which wires sparked if you touched them wrong. But Trent didn't want knowledge. Trent wanted change. And the kind of change that looked good on slide decks, not the kind that worked. He wanted vendor demos, smiling sales reps, dashboards with pretty little pie charts. Meanwhile, I had a paper copy of our master billing logic, scribbled in red pen and coffee stains, because the original software didn't play well with anything newer than Windows XP. They said I'd be moved to special projects, a purgatory of outdated laptops, fake deadlines, and a SharePoint folder no one checks. Fine by me. Let them unplug what they didn't understand. Let them delete my credentials and feel powerful. They didn't know the real systems never lived in logins or dashboards. They lived in routines, in silent handoffs, in rules passed down like folklore. Never run the batch job on a Friday, and if the invoice generator shows a negative number, unplug it and go home. You don't train that kind of knowledge, you survive it. So I packed up my plants, my desk fan, and the battered folder labeled Legacy System. Do not touch unless you enjoy fire. I left behind my smiley face mug with the crack down the middle. Let the new kid have it. It only leaked if you filled it with truth. By the next morning, my old desk had a new occupant, a junior developer named Jake, fresh out of boot camp and already sweating through his shirt. Poor thing thought legacy code was a retro video game. I walked past him on my way to the break room, nodded once, and said, "Careful. The printer eats interns." He laughed. Then the printer behind him jammed and let out a death rattle. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The real storm hadn't started yet, but the air was heavy. And Trent? He just opened the wrong closet, thinking it was a shortcut. It wasn't. It was a vault, and I was the only one who knew where the keys were buried. By week 2, Trent had replaced 3 perfectly functional internal tools with what he called best-in-class solutions, which was corporate for SaaS products with sexy websites and zero backward compatibility. It was like duct taping a Tesla engine into a 1998 Dodge Caravan and acting surprised when it wouldn't start. The billing queue, once a reliable if cranky beast, now needed 6 browser tabs, 2 login tokens, and a Slack bot named Moneyman just to push a single invoice. All because Trent heard about workflow unification in a webinar and decided he was Moses descending from Mount Zoom with stone tablets made of buzzwords. He killed off our in-house audit tracker, something I built after the great refund disaster of 2013, and replaced it with an app called FinPivot. FinPivot, which didn't support our fiscal calendar. FinPivot, which thought net 30 meant 30 likes on Instagram. The CFO tried to run an end-of-month report and got a pie chart labeled Vibes. Meanwhile, the junior devs, God bless them, started pinging me on Teams like I was some kind of forbidden oracle. At first, it was little things. "Hey Marla, quick question, do you remember where the invoice validation rules are stored?" I'd reply with a shrug emoji. "Wouldn't know. I'm just the old guard, remember?" Next day, "Hey, do you happen to recall why the billing script ignores entries from Canada?" "No clue. Ask FinPivot. Maybe it's on their roadmap." Spoiler, it wasn't. They were respectful, those kids. Smart, too. But they were caught in Trent's dreamscape of digital disruption, and every time they tried to follow his grand vision, they'd step on a rake buried under the surface of our janky infrastructure. You'd hear the whack of metal meeting skull from across the floor. I didn't sabotage anything. I want that clear. But I didn't weed the garden either. When someone rips out your fence and calls it progress, don't expect me to chase the raccoons back in. Trent started doing these transparency stand-ups every morning, 10 minutes of him waving his hands and saying things like synergy pathways and operational visibility. The one time someone brought up the mounting ticket backlog, he smiled and said, "That's just a legacy hangover. We're detoxing." Detoxing, as in, ignoring everything that used to work while pretending the rash is just part of the healing process. One of the younger QA analysts, I think her name was Sophie, approached me in the parking lot one evening, eyes darting like she was buying black market toner. She whispered, "Trent doesn't want us using your old test suite anymore, but nothing else catches the cascading errors. What should we do?" I lit a cigarette. I don't smoke. I just like the effect. Tape a picture of Trent to your screen. Every time something breaks, blame that, I said, flicking the lighter shut. She blinked. Seriously? I smiled. Not really, but it's cheaper than therapy. There was a quiet shift happening. Trent couldn't see it, too busy polishing his Slack reactions and trying to impress the CTO with daily updates written like startup fortune cookies. But the system? Oh, it saw him. It's like watching someone try to tame a raccoon with a PowerPoint presentation. Things started to break. Slowly, subtly. First, it was the invoice PDF generator, suddenly spitting out corrupted files with Chinese characters no one could trace. Then a bug that sent duplicate payment requests to one of our VIP clients. He thought it was a phishing attempt and emailed legal in all caps. And through it all, Trent stood there like the conductor of a train already on fire, waving his arms with the confidence of a man who'd never actually read a config file in his life. I stayed quiet. Let the silence do the work. Let entropy take the wheel. They wanted progress. They were about to get it. On Tuesday morning, I got the email. Subject, offboarding documentation request from Trent something at corporate new body. Hey Marla, just circling back to finalize our transition plan. Would love full documentation on all legacy billing and reconciliation systems by EOD Friday. Shouldn't take too long, right? Smiling face with smiling eyes, let me know if you need anything. Ah yes, the corporate emoji. Nothing screams I'm about to erase your life's work like a winking smiley after a passive-aggressive demand. I replied with 2 words, sure thing. Then I got to work. By work, I mean I opened a long-abandoned Confluence wiki last edited during the Obama administration. Most of the links were dead. A few pointed to articles that had been archived or outright deleted, and one proudly declared, "System deployment guide, do not use outdated, perfect." I downloaded the entire wiki as a PDF, because if Trent wanted full documentation, he was going to get 872 pages of obsolete procedures, half of which referenced discontinued software, and one recipe for banana bread someone had slipped in by accident. To top it off, I scrounged up a box from under my desk, one of those old IBM clamshell containers filled with floppy disks, a few zip drives, and a single CDR labeled 2005 Q4 Final, no seriously final. I stuck a post-it on it, just in case. Then I packed up the rest of my personal effects with the slow reverence of a priest closing up a chapel no one believed in anymore. When I came back from lunch, my cube was empty. Chair gone, desk wiped down. The faded picture of me and the old crew at the 2008 Christmas party gone. Only thing left was the faint scent of lemon cleaner and the hum of a monitor trying to find purpose. In my chair now sat a junior dev, maybe 24. Wrinkled polo shirt, hair like he'd lost a bet with a Flowbee. He looked up and smiled nervously. "Hey, I think I'm at your old station." I nodded. "You are now." He hesitated. "There was like a weird adapter thing here yesterday, with a note that said don't unplug unless you want the invoice demon to start singing." Trent said to toss it. I stared at him, blinked once. Good luck, that was it. No farewell lunch, no send-off card. Just an unceremonious reboot of the cubicle I'd inhabited longer than most of Trent's buzzwords had existed. HR didn't even swing by with their usual "we'd love your feedback on how to improve our employee experience." Nonsense. They knew better. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just hollowed out. Like someone had reached in and unplugged a wire I didn't even know I had. I walked past the break room, past the whiteboard where we used to draw cats with lasers when deployments failed. It was clean now, scrubbed of memory. Erased. Before I left, I made one last stop. Sub-basement server room. The kind of place no one visits unless something's on fire or screaming. I had a key. Of course I did. There, tucked behind a row of ancient humming towers, was the binder, a plain black 3-ring beast, stuffed with dog-eared pages, yellow sticky notes, diagrams in my handwriting. No digital copy. Never trusted the cloud for this one. I slipped it into my tote bag. Quiet. Efficient. No ceremony. Let Trent figure out why a vendor once required us to reverse engineer a proprietary XML format using a script called frankenbill.sh. Let him call support only to be told that the guy who did know was on a boat in Lake Erie, retired, and no longer taking calls unless they involved bait. As I stepped out into the sunlight, binder tucked under my arm, I felt it, not victory, not revenge. Just wait. And the knowledge that while they'd cleared my desk, they hadn't even touched what mattered. Because you can wipe a drive, but you can't delete a legacy. They announced it in the all-hands Slack like it was a damn moon landing. Rocket Billing 2.0 goes live this Thursday. Rocket Trent, we're proud to roll out our new modern billing architecture ahead of Q2 invoicing. Thanks to everyone who helped sunset the legacy stack, we're officially future-ready. Sunset, like it died peacefully in its sleep after a long, fulfilling life. No, Trent, you took the old warhorse behind the barn and replaced it with a pony that responds to voice commands but spooks at shadows. I read the announcement while sipping tea at home. Ruibos. No sugar. Appropriate, given the bitterness being brewed across town. I wasn't even mad, not anymore. You can only watch someone juggle grenades for so long before the screaming loses its impact. My inbox pinged. Sophie 2:41 p.m. You sure it'll work? I stared at the screen for a beat, then sent back one emoji. The tea emoji, the old inside joke. Back when things still functioned, we used to say the system's boiling whenever invoice jobs started spinning out. Now they'd see what real steam looked like. Trent had pushed for the Q2 billing cycle to stress test the new stack. His words, stress test. What he didn't realize or care to ask is that the system was already stressed by design. It wasn't clean code, it was ritual. It was muscle memory. It was that one undocumented setting in the FTP scheduler that had to be toggled manually, or else invoices from EU clients would convert to yen. And now, that ritual was gone. He had stripped the old scheduler, migrated the data pipelines to a sleek SAW platform that didn't recognize half our internal logic. Worse, he'd offloaded tax calculations to a plugin that ran on UTC, but the finance team worked in Eastern. Guess what happens when you run billing at midnight UTC on April 1st? Spoiler, not April 1st. But Trent didn't know that, and neither did the devs he'd put in charge. Jake, poor kid still chewing antacids like they were M and MTKS, was trying to get the new batch processor to recognize client exemptions in legacy contracts that hadn't been touched since 2014. Contracts I wrote, with rules I invented, stored in comment blocks that began with hash might break everything IF changed. And change it they did. The day before launch, I watched from the coffee shop across the street, same one I'd holed up in since special projects became please stop showing up. I could see our office windows, third floor, the glow of monitors flickering like emergency beacons. I knew that posture, the forward lean, the rapid clicking. They were debugging live. Trent, of course, was nowhere near the war zone. Word was he was presenting a slide deck to the VP of Operations. Probably had a graph showing how much headcount efficiency had been gained since Marla was repurposed. Cute. That night, Jake messaged me. Jake 10:13 p.m. Hey, weird question, but do you know why client 3782 invoices show up with negative totals after conversion? New systems throwing errors and I can't trace the pattern. I stared at it for a full minute. Client 3782, ah yes, multinational conglomerate that merged with a shell corp in 2017 to skirt EU digital tax. Their billing rules were tied to a phantom legal entity that existed solely to trigger a zero-rate VAT logic I had patched in manually, using a script named ghostxsh. That file no longer existed. Neither did the fix. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted him to fail, Jake was a good kid, but because the lesson was coming. Some things can't be taught, they have to be experienced. Thursday morning arrived with no fanfare. Billing 2.0 was scheduled to kick off at 10:00 a.m. sharp. At 9:58, Trent posted a celebratory gif of someone high-fiving themselves. At 10:03, the first support ticket landed. Invoice missing line items. At 10:07, another. All totals appear to be $0.00. By 10:12, the Slack channel was quiet, that eerie digital silence that only happens when everyone's too panicked to type. And me? I sipped my tea, no sugar, because letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you finally know when to let the fire speak for itself. By Friday, the smell of burning ego was thick enough to taste. Support tickets were multiplying like rabbits on Red Bull. First, it was invoice delays. Then, customer portals showing balances from 2019. Then came the cherry on top. A VIP client got charged 10 times the agreed rate. Not 10% more, 10 times, for a six-figure contract. Apparently, FinPivot's tax module didn't recognize our custom VIP legacy rate schema, which was hard-coded in a batch file titled Special Snowflake Spat. I hadn't named it that out of bitterness, it was just accurate. That batch job was hand-fed exceptions every quarter like a digital pet. No one told FinPivot. FinPivot didn't care. The VIP called the CEO directly. Within the hour, finance was in DEFCON mode. Meanwhile, legal started whispering words like breach and negligence in conference rooms that still had inspirational posters about teamwork on the walls. So what did Trent do? He blamed contractors. Then, because every middle manager eventually needs a sacrifice, he fired Jake. Fired, the kid who took my old cube, the one who asked questions nobody would answer. I found out through a text from Sophie, Jake's out. Trent said he was negligent with legacy rules. Everyone's freaked. IT still can't trace the root issue. Of course they couldn't trace it. The issue wasn't a line of code, it was a ritual. A pattern. 1,000 undocumented just trust me's from 1,000 Tuesdays over 2 decades. This wasn't digital failure. This was a ghost ship sailing with no crew. Trent strutted into Monday's status meeting like he still had control, declared a restructuring of project accountability, and said billing would now be overseen by a task force. He said task force like he was forming the Avengers, but it was just 3 overworked analysts and a half-baked Jira board. He didn't mention Jake's name, just called it personnel churn. I took another sip of my tea and turned the page of my crossword. Somewhere between 4 across, vindication, 5 letters, and 7 down, useless manager, rhymes with bent, I got another ping. This one was from Ravi, an old dev who'd survived 4 CTOs and 2 divorces inside that building. Ravi 2, 27 p.m. Do you remember why the invoicing API pings that random deprecated IP before executing batch export? It's failing health checks and we don't know why it's even there. I nearly spit my drink. Answer: that IP was a proxy hook we routed through after a vendor's certificate expired back in 2012. We never fixed it properly, just rerouted it and prayed. It had to return a dummy 200 response or else the export logic thought the external partner was dead. If it failed, the whole export job stalled quietly, no errors, just silence. I didn't answer Ravi, because no one had asked before. They waited until the ground opened up beneath them. That silence they were hearing, it wasn't just bugs or glitches, it was forgotten process. It was what happens when you replace wisdom with dashboards and assume experience is just clutter. The next day, they rolled back part of the deployment. Trent told the execs it was a planned resilience checkpoint, but internally, the devs knew better. Sophie told me half the team had a betting pool going on when the next client escalation would hit. The house favorite? Tuesday at noon. When the system did crash again, at 12:04 p.m. sharp, I smiled without malice. I didn't want them to fail. I just didn't want to save people who wouldn't listen until it burned. Because legacy doesn't scream when it dies, it just stops answering. Everything's automated now, Trent beamed, hands clasped like a substitute preacher who just learned how to use Google Slides. We've decoupled from the legacy stack and are moving forward with resilience at the core. This, he said with his whole chest, during a company-wide stand-up. He didn't mention that staging was currently vomiting error logs like it had food poisoning, or that backup jobs had silently failed 3 nights in a row. He definitely didn't mention that finance had stopped syncing with the new invoice tool entirely, and was now working off spreadsheets that looked like a ransom note written by Excel. I sat on my back porch with a blanket and a thermos of chamomile, watching the morning sun crawl up the fence. Hadn't even opened my laptop. I didn't need to. Sophie messaged me at 10:13 a.m. sharp. Sophie, staging went full spaghetti. Nothing syncing. Even Jenkins is giving up, he just says no. Like literally no. Then, Trent says it's all just growing pains. Wants to do a demo for the board on Friday. Growing pains. The last time someone called what we were dealing with growing pains, the company lost a CFO and 2 client accounts in a week. But sure, call the fire a candle, see how that works out when your eyebrows are gone. I hadn't planned on staying connected to any of this. I really hadn't. But it turns out when you build a monster from scratch, you can't help but glance back when you hear it groan. And this one, it was groaning, quietly, from the inside. Because while Trent pranced around telling everyone the system was AI-enhanced and future-proof, what he didn't realize was that future-proofing doesn't mean anything if the present is held together by undocumented rituals, and a daemon that only runs if the server clock is synced to the correct lunar phase. Metaphorically speaking. Mostly. By noon, Ravi had tried rebooting the export job from scratch. Got back 43 corrupted files, 1 blank PDF titled null PDF, and a mystery CSV that somehow had every invoice labeled Gary. There's no Gary in billing. Meanwhile, backups were toast. The auto-sync failed because someone had migrated the cron jobs to a cloud scheduler that didn't account for daylight savings. It skipped the sync window. Twice. I got another message. This time from Deb in finance. Deb, you wouldn't happen to know where the old invoice sanitizer script is, would you? The new tool is formatting dates in German. No greeting. No how are you. Just the faint digital whimper of someone who's finally realizing the new car doesn't have brakes. I didn't reply, not because I was cruel, but because they were still pretending this was a surprise, that it wasn't all avoidable, that I hadn't warned them without words. At 2:17 p.m., I booked a lunch for the next day. Linda, procurement, old friend, one of the last humans in the building who remembered what our systems were before they got flattened into dashboards. She picked the place. Little diner near the old office. No Wi-Fi, no QR code menus. Real coffee, real sugar, just in case the call came because they were getting close. I could feel it, it's always the same pattern. The fake confidence, the avalanche of red flags, the silence, and then the cliff. You don't hear the system scream when it dies. You hear it whisper before it jumps. It hit at 12:41 p.m. on a Wednesday, fitting somehow. Hump day. The day everything crested and tipped headfirst into the abyss. The billing pipeline didn't just error out, it collapsed. One moment invoices were crawling through the system like sick ants, and the next, the whole operation seized up like an engine filled with syrup. Slack exploded. Hash billing support, getting 500 twos across the board. All client balances showing as N/A. Did someone reset the tax schema? Why are all the invoices dated 1970? Over in Hash customer care, the flood began. Major client says they received 0 invoices. Another got billed for someone else's order. VIP wants a callback. He says, and I quote, "Is this a prank?" By 1 p.m., finance had escalated to red alert. Payment reconciliation flatlined. Refund queues stacked. AR dashboard looked like a heart monitor moments before flatline. And still, Trent held the wheel like a man who'd never seen an iceberg, until the CTO stepped into the war room, not the Slack channel, not a Zoom call, in person. CTO doesn't show up for anything below catastrophic failure. When he enters the building, you know someone's career is about to get euthanized. He looked around, lips pursed, phone still in his hand. Mid-call with someone in legal. Who, he asked quietly, has root understanding of the legacy billing stack? No one answered. Then Trent cleared his throat, sweating through his lavender shirt like a sinner on Judgment Day. I believe Marla had ownership of that system before the transition. Before the transition. As if we were talking about a weather pattern. He excused himself, retreated into his office, and shut the door behind him. Then he called me. I saw it light up. Trent, work. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, then I picked up. Marla. Hey, he said, voice pitched just a bit too high. Hope you're doing well. Define well, I said, pouring more tea. He laughed like we were still friendly. So look, he continued, we're running into a few minor hiccups with the billing system. Totally expected in any major migration. Just little edge cases, you know how it is. I didn't respond. He waited. Coughed. We were wondering if you might be able to, hop on a quick call? Just to walk us through a couple dependencies. Historical ones, nothing major. Still, I said nothing. I let the silence linger. The quiet kind. The kind that says, you made this bed. How's it feel? After a beat, I said, you removed my credentials. Yeah, we can reinstate them immediately. Full access. Whatever you need. I sipped my tea. It was lukewarm now, still better than his panic. I'm at lunch, I said calmly. Maybe later. Oh, sure. Okay, later. Great. He paused. Thanks, Marla. Really appreciate you. He said it like a man who just realized the power button was never his. I hung up. Didn't slam it. Didn't hiss or bark or gloat. Just pressed the screen. Quiet, controlled. They'd torn it all apart. And now the beast had turned on them, not out of malice, just confusion. Legacy systems aren't emotional. They don't punish. But when they're misunderstood, ignored, gutted, rewritten by people who never listened, they do what any old creature does. They fold in on themselves and wait for the one voice they remember. He called again at 4:12 p.m., sharp. This time I answered on the second ring. Marla, he said, breathless like he'd just sprinted through 5 levels of denial. We really need your help. His voice cracked somewhere between really and help. The same man who 2 weeks ago used legacy burden in a slide deck to explain my departure. Now he sounded like someone trying to Google how to land a plane mid-descent. I stirred honey into my tea and waited. The system's completely down, he continued. We tried rolling back, but nothing syncs. Finance is screaming, legal's involved, and the CTO, he's, not pleased. Still, I waited. So I was wondering, Trent said, each word dragging shame like it weighed 50 pounds if you knew anything about. The external dependencies. The ones tied to. Billing core in it? The words finally formed. External dependencies, the dark magic. The secret arteries no one ever documented because I was the documentation. I took a slow breath. There are 2 vendors, I said evenly. You'll need to call them both. They have authentication daisy chains into the invoice logic. Okay, yes, got it. 2 vendors? Great. Names? I leaned back in my chair, watched a pigeon land on the neighbor's car mirror and attack its own reflection. The first is Statlock Systems. They host our time zone interpreter in a data center in Ohio. It's licensed per fiscal quarter, but only if it's activated via the old token handshake, file name QTR ping and I. Without it, timestamps desync and you get invoice dates like January 0th. You've probably seen a few. There was a pause. I could hear him typing. Frantically. And the second? Bill Forge Atlantic, I said. They run the sandbox tax layer. We never fully migrated because they're the only ones who handle regional exemptions for jurisdictions with no physical nexus. You kill that link, you kill 40% of the logic chain. I could hear the sweat in his silence. I added, we'll need to give them the legacy line IDs or they'll treat it as a cold boot and bill you for new integration. Another long pause. Then quieter. Do you happen to know those IDs? I read them off like they were locker combinations. Statlocks is L07R2254. Bill Forge is XCT99A13. He repeated them back slowly, like reciting a prayer he didn't believe in. Thank you, Marla. Seriously. This really helps. I stayed quiet. Then, muffled, I heard him speaking to someone in the room. Yeah, I've got the vendors. Marla gave me the line IDs. Yeah, what? A pause. What's our corporate AmEx limit? Another pause, then wait. It's really only 50 grand. There it was. I could almost see his face through the phone, eyes wide, spreadsheet brain racing, realizing that those 2 vendors were about to charge a reactivation and reintegration fee that made car leases look humble. I didn't gloat, didn't chuckle. Just whispered, legacy's expensive when you throw away the keys. He mumbled something about needing to make calls and thanked me again before hanging up. And as I stared into the steam of my mug, I didn't feel victory. Not really, because this wasn't a win. This was the sound of someone learning that cutting corners with people who carry institutional memory has a cost. And it never shows up in Q1 earnings. He didn't lose to me. He lost to everything he refused to understand. By Thursday morning, Trent looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight, rumpled collar, dark circles, voice gone hoarse from explaining the unexplainable to people who still thought root access meant something you needed a gardener for. Emergency contracts were flying like confetti at a bankruptcy party. Statlock's quote came back first, $31,500 just to re-establish legacy protocol access. Bill Forge wasn't far behind, $38,000, plus an urgent reintegration fee that included something called a legacy disdain surcharge. I didn't know you could charge for arrogance, but honestly, fair. The corporate AmEx was tapped. Tried pushing it through in chunks. Declined. Trent scrambled for sign-offs from the CFO, who was already halfway through a resignation draft titled I Told You So. Customers, meanwhile, were not just upset, they were furious. One threatened legal action over a double charge that tanked their quarterly reconciliation. Another flagged compliance violations with European tax laws. Someone at a medical software company actually asked if we'd been hacked. No, ma'am. Just modernized into oblivion. Then came the real panic. Leadership tried to decipher my original documentation. I'd sent it when I left out of spite? Maybe, but mostly because I knew this day would come. They opened it like it was a treasure map. Turned out it was more like a book of ancient spells, half of it in code comments, the rest in shorthand I developed over 2 decades. An entire page just read, run this only if the export daemon hasn't failed in 72 hours. Jenkins hasn't rebooted. Q3 flag is false. You made peace with your god. Apparently no one could even find Jenkins anymore or the god. By noon, the board quietly reached out. A very polite email. Short, surgical. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting opportunity at your earliest convenience. I replied with a single line. My rate's double what it was. No hesitation, they agreed. Within the hour, no negotiation, no counter. Just a quiet contract slid across the inbox like a napkin at a bar after the music dies. But I didn't sign it, not yet. I made myself a tall glass of iced tea, real tea, none of that box peach garbage. Sat out back on the deck, sun warming the boards beneath my feet. My phone buzzed once, then twice. Slack. Message popped up. Trent, work. Can you help? No punctuation, just desperation. I watched it blink there. Blue dot, typing bubble. Silence. I took a sip, let the message sit, unread, untouched, not because I wanted to punish them, but because the message wasn't really for me. It was for the version of me they buried under repurposed and obsolete, the one who never raised her voice, the one they forgot until the fire reached the rafters. Now they remembered, and I was just enjoying my tea. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.